this is the heart of why we exist, then it shouldn't be the responsibility of just the creative department.
Okay.
It should be the responsibility of everyone.
Okay.
So finance rallies around creativity. Account management rallies around creativity. Strategy rallies around creativity. Because if we're not adding that value to our clients, then we're not doing our work. And most importantly, we've got a bigger job, which is to show clients. I mean, any marketer will tell you, one of the hardest things is for them to be taken seriously in those C-suites that we speak about. So we have to show that creative advertising makes a difference to businesses. The fact that it can be that one little nugget that you have that can propel you, even sometimes when your budgets are a challenge and you've got maybe your distribution is a challenge, because that's the thing about marketing, right? They have to think of so much more. So imagine if you could be an ally to a marketer and help that marketer and that business to shine, and in so doing create fame and love for their brands. And that's why we started with the people that we get on board.
Here we go!
How's it, everybody? Welcome to the CMO Corner. And as you know, my name is Tawani Kumalo and I'm your host. This is episode 2. So now if you remember, initially we spoke about how this year we're taking a different spin on the podcast. We'll still keep the CMOs from the client side, but we're also bringing in chief creative officers that sit at agency. And today, my guest is exactly that. I think he's a brilliant mind. And I know everyone can attest to this. And awards don't do justice to the work this man has done. So my guest today is the chief creative officer for Joe Public, Mr. Xolisa Dyeshana. How are you?
I'm fantastic, my brother.
You good?
How are you? I'm fantastic.
Super. So what I normally do is, your bio and profile I don't go through. People can find that on social media, Google, everywhere. I don't care about that. Here we talk about the things that interest us the most in marketing. Cool.
Absolutely.
So normally I start my show with an icebreaker.
Okay.
So that's why I've got my phone here. It's just like, it depends too, like who I'm talking to, so it varies. For you, I've done something slightly different, where I want to quiz you a bit. It's not necessarily a quiz, but I'm going to give you, I think, 3 advertising quotes, if not 4. That's what I've Googled here. Actually, it's 4. And I want you to tell me who actually said this.
Oh my God, that is terrible. I have no idea what advertising people say.
Let's try it out. I think you'll get it. I've got some easy ones and then maybe some odd ones. If it doesn't sell, it's not creative. Come on, X.
I have no idea who said that.
Okay, that's Ogilvy.
Yeah, I do. I would be like the Ogilvies and all those guys.
Okay, let's try another one. Stopping advertising to save money is like stopping your watch to save time.
I have no idea. What
Henry Ford. Okay, last one. Let's see. Let me try and find an easy one.
There is no easy ones. I don't know what advertising people say.
A good ad, which is not run, never produces sales.
I have
You're brilliant.
We don't study advertising quotes. That's not what happens.
Okay. Fine. Now, let's get to the meat.
Absolutely.
Let's get to the meat. Thank you very much for joining.
And when you're done, you must go and quote from this interview and you must ask someone who said that.
I'll try. Let's see if anyone will win. Cool. My good sir, you've got tons and tons of awards, but I'm not here to talk about your awards.
Sure.
I'm here to talk about Xolisa the man, who's added so much value into the space that we operate in marketing. And I hope that you can share some light in helping either people at C-suite as well, because I think we learn from each other, and anyone that's actually coming up to learn from you.
Sure.
So, honest conversation, that's what I want us to have.
100%.
So let's start from the beginning. who Xolisa is, upbringing, just to set the context. I'm sure you've told the story multiple times, but I think that's always an important thing to share so people understand everything else from there.
Absolutely. So who Xolisa is I'm the last born out of a family of 7.
Yeah.
And it's a whole bunch of dudes. There's only one girl, and she is my sister, the oldest in the family, lucky for her. And then it was just a whole bunch of brothers.
Yeah.
And interesting fact is, I actually haven't lived at home since 1989.
Hectic.
Yeah. So I've had to learn to be extremely independent.
Yeah.
My parents sent me away to learn English and live with my cousins in Cape Town.
Yeah.
And by learning English, I mean my cousins were going to colored school, so I got to go there, or what was known as that. And then when they opened up what we call Model C schools today, when they opened those up, they sent me back to East London, and then I was very privileged to go to a very good school down there called Selborne College.
Yeah.
And I was one of the first youngsters to go there, and I became a boarder.
Okay.
And so right through up until matric, and the good thing about my Selborne journey, I always talk about the fact that it helped me to solidify what I've always kind of had an inkling that I had, which is I've always known that I have this creative, artistic side to me. And so they had the subjects to accommodate that and to help me hone that. And so the interesting thing is when I finished studying, then my parents were like, well, that's as far as it goes, right? So you're not going to varsity because we can't afford for you to go to varsity.
Yeah.
The UCTs and the WITSs and everything. At that time, advertising colleges, in fact, till today, advertising colleges cost even more than varsity. So that was completely out. And it actually took a brother of mine, because it was a bit depressing, I think, in my life at that stage. And it took a brother of mine who was on the SRC at what I would refer to as a black technicon. It was Peninsula Technicon.
Yeah.
My brother was on the SRC. He gave me a call and he said, "Chip, what are you going to do?" Because for when a gap year is not an option. And I'll never forget, he said to me, "Xolisa, life is a marathon, and it may seem that your friends are all leaving you behind now, but you guys will find each other along the way." And I listened to him, and I woke up the next morning. I left my house in Tanzania. I went to a highway. I got onto a bus with nothing but my bag and my portfolio of work that I had done during my high school years.
Yeah.
And I walked into Peninsula Technicon, and that's when, the journey pretty much began. And it was very, very interesting. I mean, every bit of my story has a story. You know what I mean? They wouldn't accept me.
Yes.
My brother literally had to fight for me.
Yeah.
Which he did, thank God. And it was just amazing. I mean, I also the department, the graphic design department, because that's what I went to study there.
Yeah.
It was actually separate. It was quite separate from the rest of campus. And there was this notion that if you did this, then you cannot be any part of student life, because you are working nights, days, weekends. And I sort of challenge myself, which is something that I've done at multiple junctures in my life, where whatever the norm is, I try and challenge myself not to be that. So I was very active during my tertiary years.
Yeah.
I somehow said it must be that it can be done. You can be a part of student life. Also, a lot of people that were in that faculty were not staying at the campus, were sort of detached from the campus. I wasn't like that. I lived there. So what sense does it make that I, on weekends I'm with all these people and yet I separate myself? So I became a part of student life. I actually ended up in structures within my tertiary institution. But somehow I was also able to get the work done. And so when I graduated, I felt a great sense of achievement, because I had done it in what I believed was quite a different way. And then I came back, did my honors, and then I couldn't get a job in advertising.
Yeah.
I couldn't get a job. I ended up working at a call center. I thought I'd work at a call center for like 2 months, 3 months. Turned out to be more than 6 months, more
Crazy.
than a year.
No.
Another very
Low.
depressed and low part of my life. I remember I had to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning. I had to take a taxi. I had to take a train for over an hour, and then eventually I'd get there. A funny story is that, when I come home, when it seemed that really like this is lasting for a lot longer than I thought, I remember I had this ritual that I do when I'm walking to the train station. At the end of work, I'd kick a can, and as I kicked this can, I'd say things to myself, pretty much that, things like, you're a failure. You really, really are. You are the one that the family invested in, the one that got to have that education, and this is how your story ends up. So it was also quite self-deprecating on my part. But as I said, I suppose that was just a reaction to the fact that it was a low point. And then I'd get into the train, and then I had this tradition of whoever was sitting next to me, I'd tell them, listen, this is where I'm getting off. And because I could never stay awake. By the end of that day, I was done. So yeah, man, that was basically the journey coming up. And it all changed one day when I received a call from my agent, and she basically told me that the top agency in South Africa, which at the time was FCB, and just to give you context, my call center was in Woodstock, and not the fashionable Woodstock that everybody knows now. Yeah. But my where I worked was in Woodstock, and this interview was in Camps Bay.
Yeah,
so
different.
So just to give you the contrast. And I went for this interview, and the funny thing is the interview was actually for a copywriter. And so when the guy, he went through my stuff, he seemed fairly impressed with my stuff, but then he said, but there's a problem here because we're actually looking for a copywriter, and from your qualifications says that you're a graphic designer.
Yeah.
And this became one of many times in my life where what I had perceived as a disadvantage at the time actually turned out to be an advantage.
Okay.
And so I said to him, well, it's funny that you say that, because where I went to school, we couldn't afford to have a copywriter on his own and a graphic designer or art director on their own.
Got you.
So everything that you liked about my work was actually written by me and designed by me.
There you
so
go.
Based on that, he then said, well, I'll take a chance on you.
Crazy.
And then I had my little pursuit of happiness moment. and that's basically how the journey started for me.
Wow, that's
I'll never
beautiful.
forget that man, Philip van Rensburg used to be the MD.
That's such a beautiful story. And you talk about how advertising schools are expensive, and they still are. So just a brief story. When I had to decide what I wanted to do, my thing was advertising.
Yeah.
So as similar to you, I couldn't afford to go to an advertising school because they're all private and the fees are high, etc.
Yep.
Long story cut short, I figured out a way to get a glimpse of advertising through marketing, through DUT and IMM, where I can get a bursary.
Yes.
So I can have a taste of what advertising is actually.
Yes.
But like you, I think the benefit is that I've got a holistic view because I wasn't focusing specifically on one thing.
Absolutely.
Which I think is such a beautiful thing. But anyway, so you start in your career at FCB.
Yeah.
And how do you then migrate from FCB to Joe Public? Because Joe Public has dominated over the past 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. And I want to take that leap or that story from FCB and then eventually getting to Joe Public and the work that you're currently doing right now.
So it's an interesting story, that. So when I joined FCB, they had made some significant acquisitions within South Africa. And for anyone who doesn't know, how it generally works is that if an agency is born in this country, and once that agency starts to do well or be noticed or make it into the top whatever, then generally what you have happening is that the multinationals then take interest.
Yes.
And oftentimes they'll make an offer to
Yes.
buy. And so at that time when I joined, FCB had acquired Joe Public. So Joe Public started in...
okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
So Joe Public started in 98.
Yeah.
And so I think around 2001, they were showed more zeros than they'd ever seen by FCB, which belonged to IPG.
Yeah.
And so they sold their business.
Aha.
And so they sold their business. And so when I joined, FCB actually owned Joe Public.
Got you.
Then they had also made another acquisition, which was Azagais in Johannesburg.
Okay.
And so and so they wanted to breathe new life into Azagais, and you had this new, fresh brand from Cape Town that they just acquired.
Yeah.
So what they did is that they then asked the owners, the founders, to come to Johannesburg and take over Azagais
Okay.
that they had bought
Okay.
and inherit the clients and
Yeah.
inherit the staff, which, by the way, later in the story you come to see is one of the hardest things that you can do, right? When you just change the top.
Yeah.
Because ultimately,
Definitely.
you know, those people's loyalties are still with the previous management, and it
Yes.
becomes a very tricky situation to navigate. But anyway, so what happened was how Joe Public got to be in Johannesburg from Cape Town, which
Yeah.
is where it was founded, is the guys came over to take over as a guys, rebrand it as Joe Public.
Got you.
So they rebranded it as Joe Public. At that time, you know, my career in FCB is really taking off. There's amazing things happening. Within a very short time, I became a midweight writer. I became a senior writer where I was working. I was promoted to deputy creative director. And one of the nice things about my journey as well is that I pretty much started out in retail,
Yeah.
where our sole client was Checkers Checkers ShopRite,
Yeah.
and then gradually started doing a little bit of work in Toyota with the Joburg office. But then after that, that's when I got into the below the line space. So from retail to below the line.
Yeah.
And then eventually I moved into the above the line space. So
Got you.
it's quite nice to know that I've had all the experience leading up to where I am now. And so what happened was in 2006. In 2006, I received a call, and it was Joe Public in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget Pepe Mare, a very different Pepe Mare to the one that people know today. He still had long hair. He used to still wear pixie shoes, and he invited me for an interview. This was in Cape Town,
Yeah.
in their office on Kloof, and he had an Amstel in his hand. I'll never forget. And we just went through this interview, and I remember thinking to myself, what the heck am I doing? Like, how am I leaving that level of structure?
Yeah.
You know, because FCB seemed like such a well-oiled
Yes.
machine. And that's the thing about well-oiled machines is that, you know, at first I was like, how can I be leaving that for this?
Yes.
You know, this seemed very cowboyish.
Yeah.
But anyway, they made me a really, really good offer.
Sure.
I laugh at how much I moved to Johannesburg for today. I don't even think we give that to people as a starting salary in this
crazy.
career anymore. And so we had this meeting. They made me the offer, and I thought to myself, what do I have to lose?
Yeah.
Excuse me. And so I moved up. In 2006, I joined Joe Public in June 2006. And I can tell you now, it took me less than a month to realize two things.
Yeah.
I realized that when you join a smaller type of agency, it becomes almost impossible to hide. And I learned very quickly that I was simply just in a different level of talent. It was just, the guys were just absolutely phenomenal. And I said, okay, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to grow.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that at the time when I joined the agency, the same Pepe Mare, who is partners with Gareth Lick, the
Yeah.
two of them founded the business. So Pepe Mare, remember they had taken over as a guys,
Yeah.
and it was now Joe Public.
Yeah.
So Pepe Mare ended up firing his MD,
Yeah.
right? He fired his MD for some really serious differences that they had.
Sure.
And the first thing that the MD did is that he went and joined their biggest client, who at that time was one of the big tile makers, kitchenware, all of that in the country. And the first thing that guy did is he fired Joe Public. So 2 months into me joining this organization,
Rollercoaster.
we lost our biggest client. And we had to get rid of that client made up about close to 80% of our revenue.
No.
And therefore we had to get rid of close to 80% of our staff overnight. The sad thing about this story is that if you think about it, the people that we ultimately had to get rid of are people that he had hired. But be that as it may, that was our reality, and that's what happened. And I remember at that time, between Pepe and Gareth, they did a lot of self-reflective work. And that's when they decided that, you know what, we need to get back to the essence of why we exist as an agency. Why did we start this thing?
Yeah.
And why the heck were we called Joe Public? Because advertising is by and large a very egotistical game.
Yeah.
It's the same as the lawyers, the same
Yeah.
as the auditors.
Yeah.
Your name is on the door, buddy.
Yeah.
Ogilvy and Mather,
Yeah.
Foot Cone and Belding, FCB,
Yeah.
Young and Rubicam. You name them, So why were we called Joe Public? And the
yeah.
whole thing was, we've always been about the man on the street. We're a company of down-to-earth individuals that just really, really want to try and do good. And so then we said, essentially, we're a company for people, by people.
Yeah.
And then the next question was, if we're a company that's for people and by people, then how can we be owned by Americans? And that's when the guys decided to go and approach FCB and to say to the CEO at that time, Neil van der Wiel, that they would like to buy the business back. Needless to say, that didn't go very well.
I can imagine.
That didn't go because, it's not done. Like, who does that? Why would you want to leave this big international organization to be a South African organization again? Like, that just didn't make sense to anyone. But the guys were adamant. And eventually, in the heart of the recession in 2008, they bought the business back. And so from 2009 going forward, we had to rebuild the agency from scratch. And that built us up to what you see today.
And I can tell everyone the work that Joe Public has done. I think I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine yesterday, and we were talking about agencies, and we're toying around, right? On who the best agencies are because they want to take something to pitch.
Yeah.
And the moment you say Joe, people are just like, makes sense. Like, we should actually be speaking to a Joe Public if we want great work.
That's very flattering. Thank you.
And it doesn't just come from great work. I think even the culture of the organization is quite important.
Yeah.
And what you guys have documented quite well is growth.
Yeah.
And what you guys stand for.
Absolutely.
And if I recall, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you speak about growth of the people,
Yeah.
speak about growth of the brands,
Yeah.
and growth of the country.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not submitting an interview or CV right now. Don't worry. I just did my research.
Absolutely.
But for me, what I want to double click on is, how do you do these things? Growing your people, how do you then grow the brands, and how do you see yourself? Because someone else might say it's an agency, how are you growing the country?
Yeah. So it's a very interesting one. And I must tell you, the road to finding our purpose and to being a purpose-led organization was a very, very, very meticulous one. It was a long one. But it was the most important road that we've ever taken. It has given us our North Star. Every single thing that we do is measured up against that purpose that you really articulated so beautifully. So our purpose is growth.
Yeah.
And for us, the whole thing is about being the fertile soil that serves the growth of our people, of our clients, and our country. and it was so interesting, and we co-created that, right?
Okay.
We co-created that with the people that worked here at the time.
Yeah.
And you know, when we got together in a room, I'll never forget our lead strategist, one of our directors in the company, Laurent, along with Pepe, were leading the session. And one of the questions that we asked people why they come to work each day, and it's amazing. You know, we've got something in this agency that we call why digging.
Okay.
And it comes from a little child, because a little child, you'll ask a little child a question,
why?
and then they'll say why,
Yeah.
and they'll say why,
Yeah.
and in so doing, you know, you kind of have to change your answer around,
Yes.
and before you know it, you really start to get to the essence and
Gotcha.
the meat. And so, you know, if you ask anybody why they come to work, the first thing that they'll tell you is that they come to work to make a living.
Yes.
You know, we come here to make money.
Yeah.
But the more you dig, which is what we did, you know, we really started to get to the essence. And at the heart of it was that people in our organization come to work to grow. I want to, within this work that I'm doing here, within these engagements that I'm doing here, I want to walk away knowing that I'm better than when I came here.
Sure.
Because I spend so much of my time here.
True.
So hence we then stumbled on growth, and then we crystallized it with the articulation that I've just given you. And it was very interesting because we had a huge debate, because how dare you say that you want to grow your people before you say you want to grow the clients?
Yeah.
And that is how the industry, in our view, traditionally worked. There was this level of fear
Yeah.
when it came to clients. So and ours was really, how do we create an organization? We're starting from scratch.
Yes.
So how do we create norms that are beyond what we've been taught?
Sure.
The limited thinking of what we've been taught that this industry is about.
Yeah.
How do we create an agency that is in touch with South Africa
Yes.
and where this country is going? How do we create an agency that has the prosperity of this country at its core? Because we've bought ourselves from international, so therefore naturally our affection, our commitment
Yes.
towards a prosperous South African company would naturally have to be more than what we've seen.
Yes.
So those are the things that have really driven us, Tabani. And you know, and we were very clear that the number one thing that clients come to us for is how we can change their business is through our creativity.
Yep.
How that is the one thing. You know, we can be the nicest people on earth. It's like a restaurant can have the best service, but if the food is terrible,
Yep.
that's not going to be the best restaurant in town.
Yes.
So we became very, very clear that the business of our agency is creativity.
Okay.
And so we structured, and we did something else, which for us was very important to do. If this is the business, if this is the heart of why we exist, then it shouldn't be the responsibility of just the creative department.
Okay.
It should be the responsibility of everyone.
Okay.
So finance
Yes.
rallies around creativity.
Yes.
Account management rallies around creativity. Strategy rallies around creativity, because if we're not adding that value to our clients, then we're not doing our work. And most importantly, we've got a bigger job, which is to show clients. I mean, any marketer will tell you, one of the hardest things is for them to be taken seriously in those C-suites that we speak about.
Bro.
So we have to show that creative advertising makes a difference to businesses. The fact that it can be that one little nugget that you have that can propel you, even sometimes when your budgets are a challenge, and you've got maybe your distribution is a challenge, because that's the thing about marketing, right? They have to think of so much more.
Yep.
So imagine if you could be an ally to a marketer and help that marketer and that business to shine, and in so doing create fame and love for their brands. And that's why we started with the people that we get on board.
Yeah.
Who are the people that we have here? How talented are they? What opportunities do they have? What opportunities do we give them? If you see our staff, you'll hear some of the most beautiful stories about where our people come from. We work with South African schools, and we bring kids from those schools into our organization who are now heading up our IT department, who are now big players within our strategy departments, etc., etc., etc. We get our talent from everywhere because we believe that talent in South Africa can not only be attained through traditional means, and you have to be understanding of that. And the only way you can even know that is if you get the right people in.
Yeah.
And they can say to you, there's no way that you're going to get that guy that way. And so that's what this transformation of our people has done. And so we start with that, and we know that if we get the right people with the right talent, and if we give them the right training, then that is what will make a difference to our clients. And that's why the clients come second, because we can never make a difference to their business if we don't start with growing our people.
Yeah.
So hence we said we grow our people, and that will mean that we can grow our clients, and by so doing we create jobs. By so doing, we can be responsible in the messaging that we put out. There's billions and billions of rands that are spent on advertising. And so advertisers and marketers have a responsibility in terms of the messaging that we're putting out there. And that is some of the ways that when we talk about growing our country, that is what we're talking about.
So what you mentioned, and there's two things you mentioned, which I want us to definitely touch on. You and I can sit here the whole day. So the first one, you mentioned creativity.
Yeah.
And how it's at the center of what you guys are doing and the culture of this business. Mm-hmm. Your title is Chief Creative Officer. Mm-hmm. So if I was to simplify everything you've just said, this business, and not disregarding everyone else, is highly reliant on you because you have to foster that culture of creativity. How do you do that, X? It sounds like such a basic question, but it's just like, I want to get to the nuts and bolts of how do you nurture the talent and drive that creative work and be so consistent over a period? Because I would like to believe it's something that you can teach. I'm not sure, but you can share. You know better.
So the interesting thing about this organization is that, as I mentioned to you, that creativity, ultimately, I mean, the buck stops with myself and with Pepe as the heads of the creative department. But the one thing that I can tell you is that we are one organization where creativity is not the sole responsibility of the creative department.
Got you.
So every single one of the leaders in this business is rallied around our creativity and as the tool, as the how we get to achieve the growth that we've been speaking about. And one of the most fortunate things that we have is that we have such a diverse team.
Yeah.
There are 6 of us. There is an Afrikaans guy, there is in Pepe, there is a English guy in Gareth, there is a Xhosa guy in me, there is a French Afrikaans guy in Laurent who heads up our strategy. There is two amazing Bokotos in Bume, who is Zulu, and Kutala, who is, I call Kutala I call her worldly. She's just that kind of a person, you know. So between all of us and all our diverse views, we get together. And by the way, we've been, as far as I know, we've been together the longest as a management team.
That's beautiful.
And what happens there is that you really build a great understanding and a great deal of trust between the two of you. So that's why I always talk about, by the way, to a lot of people, Joe Public seems to, have or be achieving relative success. To us, we are nowhere. We are absolutely nowhere. I'm not even going to lie to you. If there is a flight of stairs, we're probably on the first one. That is honestly what we believe we can achieve if we carry on, with our feet down on the ground.
Yes, that's important.
But honestly, Tabani, we have a group of people that is so clear on how far we have to go.
Yeah.
There is the world that we have to impact.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've been so passionate about is that, for so long, advertising has been there. We've seen it, it's been there. And we've challenged ourselves to say, I don't think that it's ever been harder to be in communication than it is now.
Yeah.
Because people have got so many more choices. Because it's been so democratized.
Yeah.
A young kid who knows how to play the piano very well can end up being the trending topic for 2 weeks or a month.
Definitely.
And that's what you're competing with.
Yeah.
You're competing with the Yanos.
Yes.
You're competing with all this amazing talent that we are seeing in our country that no longer needs your permission to exist because you no longer own all the screens.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where it's humbled us so much, I think, as an industry. And I think that's the only way to go forward as an industry. It's to be humble and to know that you earn that space in between your consumers' ears. And how do you do that? How do you not just talk at them? How do you make them a part of this conversation? That's what we think brands have to do if they are to resonate with consumers. People are so much more skeptical. You want to know, you go on to social media now.
Yeah.
The one trigger that they are ready to pull is against a corporate organization.
Yes.
That's the one trigger that they are ready to pull. But at the same time, they are also ready to embrace one that embraces them.
Yes.
And hence, with
right.
all our brands, the one thing that we try and get them to understand is that, and we work together with them. That's the other thing that I have to be very, very clear about. You can never speak about any part of our agency without talking about the amazing clients that we have. We would be nowhere. The whole thing about our journey is that we've been blessed with amazing clients. And we form such deep relationships with our clients. That's why our relationships with our clients last. Because we go on a journey with them and we become loyal to them and we grow with them. When things are good, we're there. When things are bad, anyone can tell you of our clients.
Yeah.
Do you know what none of our clients can ever say?
What?
None of our clients can never say,
Yeah.
can ever say that they haven't seen myself,
Yeah.
Kutala, Mpume, Gareth, Laurent, and Pepe in their meetings. We are that invested. It's our money. And that, because that is the truth, our level of ownership, we genuinely care for every single one of our clients, from the smallest to the biggest. Because we are that invested in the business, and that's what we want to teach to our people. So it becomes a culture, what you were talking about the other day.
Yeah.
It becomes, some people say that Joe Public is a bit of a cult, and we always say, well, it's a funny thing because cult is in culture. But literally, for me, where I really get so excited and so proud is when I'm sitting at my house in the middle of an afternoon on a Saturday, and I get a phone call from a young person who says to me, X, I'm so sorry to bother you on your weekend, but you know that Ashupol thing that we were sitting with? I just had this thought that what if we did it this way and what if we did it that way?
Sure.
So that's what I'm talking about when it becomes a culture where the guys, where from a leadership perspective, we have a responsibility to lead by that example.
Yes.
But then when it starts to permeate to the younger people, and they become so passionate about their work, and then they get the accolades from that, and their careers grow. And we always say we're one agency. When it comes to our people, we are one agency that will never stop someone that wants to leave us.
Yeah.
Because we are aware that most people that come here will grow their portfolios. That's what we're fighting for. That's what our clients are in with us for, to make sure that people get to do amazing work within the organization. And when you do that, you do know that, the chances of your people being poached increases a lot.
True.
So we always say that some people grow to us, some people grow through us.
Oof.
And we allow everybody to do exactly that. And interestingly, a lot of our really good people just stick around, just like our clients.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Crazy. The second thing you mentioned
Yeah.
was the amount of billions that are sitting in this industry of ours.
Yeah.
And I was reading, could be an outdated stat now. It was from Nielsen, if I remember correctly. So it was saying there's 45 billion
Yeah.
rand that sits in the advertising industry. And out of that, and I guess my question is twofold. And out of that, I think it's 1%, if not 2%, that actually goes to black-owned agencies. Whether it's 100%, 50%, doesn't really matter at this point. But that equates to like 900 million, if my math is correct.
Yeah.
To split amongst just the black agencies. The rest, so let's round it off. The rest then goes to all the white agencies.
And many of those, most of those, are multinational, big multinationals.
To your point earlier
So it's
on.
going offshore, yeah.
It boggles me, X. And I think, one, on your deal that you did, I think it was 2020, kudos to you and everyone else that was involved. I think it's a step in the right direction, but it's taking too long.
Yeah.
We can't be discussing this thing still, but you're sharing 1%. What's wrong with the industry? Maybe that's my first question. And how do we solve for that?
So it's an interesting one, and it's one of those touchy subjects, of course, because you've got people that feel very strongly about it, myself included, actually. But I think we may have slightly different views in terms of how to solve it.
Yes.
And my general view in terms of how to solve it, you can have quite a one-dimensional view, and there's nothing wrong with that, or you can have a multi-dimensional view of how to solve it.
Cool.
For me, the issue of transformation in our industry is so multi-layered. There's the aspect of it that's around how much kids know that this industry even exists. How much our government has done to give kids that knowledge in terms of career choices. I mentioned to you that it took me going to a previously white school in order to learn that art was a viable career, as an example. So you've got that part of it. That part of it affects how many people then even consider this as a career. You've also got the part of it where from a parent's perspective, the level of education that's needed there, because you can decide that you want to go into the creative field, but your parent or your guardian, who ultimately has to pay, says no. I don't understand it. Better I don't understand it than no, because if I have to pay for this, I would much rather go for tried and tested commerce type of careers. So you've got that aspect to it, and then you've got the agency makeup. What does that look like? Where's the transformation there, and at significant levels, at all levels. And then you've got the challenges around the fact that, for instance, if we're talking creative, a creative, you don't hire somebody, you don't study to be a creative director. You have to go through from the bottom up. So if you're not concentrating on that funnel, and everything that I've talked about affects that funnel, if you're not affecting that funnel, what's happening to the industry? How then do you expect to have this hugely transformed industry at the top, across, by the way, from all the different disciplines within the industry? So that's where, for me, it's so multifaceted, this problem that we have. And then we get to the thing around ownership. First of all, how do you transform some of the agencies that already exist? Because for me that's also just as important. That's why our deal is something that I'm so proud of, because you had this agency that pretty much restarted itself around 2009, 2010. I became a shareholder soon thereafter. Kutala also did, etc. And so we grew this thing, but essentially what then started to happen is that we started being, remember I said to you at the beginning what happens? We started to make our way into that top 10. And what happens when you get there and you're independent, every single person calls you. And I'm so proud of ourselves because we said no to all those offers. We literally rejected every single one because now we had a purpose. And our purpose is what made every decision so much more easier because we were clear. There's no way that we would have bought ourselves back and then sold ourselves, just grown our business just to become 4 or 5 rich guys again. And so when all of this happened, we made the choice and we said, we cannot say that we're growing this agency without empowering the people within it. And that's why ours became we're not growing the people in it, and also we're not growing our country. And hence we sold to a black company. And we also had a management buyout from people within the organization. And then comes, and so I think that is very important in terms of how we are transforming existing companies. And then comes the part around black-owned agencies, the ones that are born that way, and how much of that are we nurturing and are we growing? There's too few. There's some brilliant ones, by the way.
Yeah.
There are some brilliant ones. I have to give a shout out to the likes of Osmu at Odd Number.
Yes,
they're doing brilliant work. You've got the amazing ladies at Think, Onkhabi Singh, and Mukondi. You've really got some people that are really starting to make strides. You've got some amazing ones I know in the media space, etc., that are really starting to make strides. and my thing is, how do we accelerate that?
Yes.
Because you can't drag someone to start a business as well. And at the same time, when people do start businesses, how do we make it viable for them? How do we make it worth it for them? And I'm so happy that, in a platform like this, for instance, we've got marketers that listen to this podcast. And for me, it's how do they use what they have to make sure that they help us in this fight?
True.
So that, dude, it's freaking 45 billion. There is enough for everybody. So how do you make sure that we spread all of this and we help these companies to grow?
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not sure if there's a single answer.
Yeah.
I don't think that there is, but I think that by doing all of these things and flip, but not nearly quick enough, but by doing all of these things, that's when I think we're going to. And I have to say this as well, Tabani. When I compare this industry to how it was when I started, we have come such a long way.
Is it?
We honestly have come such a long way. There used to be a time in advertising when you could watch a piece of commercial or a piece of film or whatever it was, and you would know instinctively that, there was no black person in the room when that was done. Absolutely
true.
Yeah, I
was going to say, I'd argue even now I might have a sense.
But absolutely, you might have a sense. But I'll give you an example.
Sure.
For me, even as an advertising person, I was there. But nowadays, I can never be sure because I know that we've come a long way. That person may not have a sufficient voice. That's another problem. But at least I know that. Look, the likelihood that there was some level of diversity in that room has grown immensely from when I started.
Sure. Okay, clearly there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Over a very long period.
Yeah, absolutely.
But hopefully we can fix it.
Yep.
So as you wind down...
Well, very quickly,
sure.
I look at other creative fields. I just feel that I want, if it was up to me, I mean, the marketers hold the budgets and all of those, so definitely assist us, please help us.
Sure.
I believe that any agency that's starting, I don't believe that any agency will truly achieve success without creative excellence.
Okay.
So for me, if you do start an agency, whether black, whether white, whether creativity, in my view, is the currency that you need for a marketer to consider you, because why would they come to you versus somebody else? And so for me, those things are so key. But I look at some of the other creative industries where, for me, one of the best things that has happened is that people of color haven't asked for permission.
Sure.
Think about what's happened in music. Think about what's happened in visual arts and all of those things. And when we just do our thing, trust me, it reminds me of the old adage: build it and they will come.
Yes.
Build it and they will come.
Yeah, Okay. So as we wind down, my biggest question to you is, with the work that you are currently doing, and I know you do a lot, you just don't speak about it. How do we start honing and bringing in more creatives from call it, if you want to call it, black people? Because again, to our point, I don't think the industry is as transformed as it should be.
Yes.
And the transformation conversation for me, X, is not we want black people to take over. No. It's about representation of how the country landscape is.
Absolutely.
That's what it is.
Yep.
So the fight is not that you should get less because we should get more. No.
Absolutely.
We just want representation. What things, initiatives are you involved in? Or what can we do in order to bring more people in? Because I think there's a lot of work, like you just mentioned now, that still needs to be done in the industry.
You know, Tabani, I think it's one of those, for me, if anyone with any level of influence were to do their part where they are. And I always talk about, you know, at the end of the day, if there's one thing that we can control, it's our organization.
Yes.
It's our organization. If there's one person that we can look at in the mirror and we say, what are you doing? You know, it's where we are.
Yeah.
It's by the kind of work we do. It's by the kind of clients and people that we attract, by the kind of clients and people that we help, that we work with, that help us to grow. It's honestly around how do we become a shining example to the world as an organization. And there's so much that we are trying to do all the time. In fact, the funny thing is, we've got quite a big, this year is our 25th anniversary. Thank you very much. And
when is it?
It's,
What's
God,
I
forget the date.
Okay,
I forget
Bring
the
you
date.
something special.
Thank you. I'll let you know what the date is. But we've got a big announcement that we're actually making this Sunday.
This Sunday?
This Sunday, look by the Sunday Times.
Okay.
With regards to what we are choosing to do as a celebration for our 25th anniversary.
Can't wait.
And you know, we're an ad agency, and I think almost naturally we'd probably want to party up a storm and all of that. But in the context of understanding where we are and understanding what the challenges are in our country, if you watch the news, students can't even get a bed to sleep on. They're sleeping in corridors. There's protests all over the country. People just wanting access to education. So for our 25th anniversary, we've asked ourselves, what can we do as a citizen of this country, as a proud citizen of this country? What can we do to make a difference? So it's things like that. It's I think it's marketers saying that, and marketers have been very, very, very effective in transforming our industry, by the way.
Okay.
Because it's been amazing, you know, the kind of pressure that we've had, you know, good pressure to make sure that we transform in order to be eligible for pitches, etc. You know, also this is where you have to commend things like government, etc. Because there's also the pressure that comes onto companies. There's also the pressure that comes onto us. But more than anything, what you want is an industry that wants to do this, that wants to do transformation, not because of pressure, but because it works. We are a living example of that. It works. Any relative success that we've enjoyed or are enjoying or are beginning to enjoy, at the heart of that is our diverse team. And we want to be a shining example by honestly being as authentic as we can, bringing in as much people who can relate to what is happening in our country and help us to put it into our communication, to create work that'll inspire people, we always say we want to create we want to create advertising that moves people as much as music does. You know, and imagine if we could get that for all our clients. Imagine if we could get that for all our staff, for our country. Imagine when the world sees our work, which is unashamedly from this part of the world. So that's the long-term vision. We are, as I said to you, just on the first step, but the journey excites us like you can never believe.
I'm so happy for you, bro.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time with me.
Uh-huh.
I hope everyone that listens will get value from this. I did, surely.
Thank you.
And I look forward to Sunday to see what the announcement is going to be. Last question to close out.
Yeah.
If you want to be remembered, how would you want to be remembered in the creative industry when everything is said and done? You as Xolisa, not your public.
I would want to be remembered as someone who contributed to the industry and who left the industry much better than I found it.
Okay. Thank you, my good sir.
Thank you, my brother.
It's a wrap. Thank you, dog.
Thank you.
Here